So My Hero Academia Chapter 429 is finally out, and where did we pick up with a brief shift in perspective before cutting right back exactly to where the last chapter left off. So as this chapter opens up, we're greeted to a narration from a mysterious character who is quickly revealed to be the mysterious menacing looking man who appeared in chapter 425. A chapter you can look back on my channel. Huh? What do you mean there's no chapter 425 on my channel? I totally made a chapter 425. I mean, I definitely no, I didn't make that at all. Support the official release. But anyways, the mysterious man goes on to explain that when he was younger, the quirk that manifested in him was a mutation. Now what I mean by mutation is that his quirk wasn't inherited or similar to either of his parents. He had an entirely brand new quirk. Not to be confused with the quirk type classified as mutation. When his family first discovered this mutation, they seemed overjoyed with the result. However, this enjoyment was actually a ruse. And shortly after, they locked the mysterious man in an underground room in their house, away from the eyes of the public. Now, it's not specified exactly why they did it, but it can be assumed it was done through the shame of his difference, a common theme throughout the series. And unfortunately for the young man, he remained locked away in the darkness of this makeshift prison cell for numerous years, where his mouth was tied up, preventing him from calling out for aid, and where he spent the entire time terrified and crying. That's pretty fucked up. Although, in a twist of fate, one day as the man was locked up, he heard his family shouting in a panic, "This country is doomed," before going to his cellar and throwing him one last loaf of bread before leaving him and disappearing forever. An action that would have resulted in the man's eventual demise, being trapped underground with no escape, if it wasn't for a large explosion blowing up a hole in his underground cellar, freeing him from captivity. And in case you haven't caught on, basically this man was freed due to the destruction caused during the final war arc. And while this escape was a moment of hope for the man, upon leaving his cell, not only did he find that being in the sun after all these years hurt him, forcing him to remain in the shadows, but he was hurt by the fact that while he suffered alone and terrified for years, everyone else on the outside was happy and together, and he couldn't understand why they were like this. Yet, before the man could find the answer to this question, but with this sentiment in mind, the story cuts away and back on over to Uraraka and Midoriya, where Uraraka, now thinking about Toga's final words and how she believes she is only alive today thanks to Toga's death, becomes overwhelmed by her emotions, finally letting them loose, shouting out and bursting into tears. Midoriya, in seeing this, rushes towards Uraraka to comfort her, but as he approaches, Ochako covers her face in an attempt to hide her tears from him, and she asks him how he even got here, to which Midoriya replies that he used One for All, which is very sweet considering any time he uses it now could be his last. So him using it to get to Ochako shows just how important she is to him. The two then converse as Midoriya explains that he didn't actually know she would be here, he just had a hunch as it was a place where they had an important talk, and that while she may hide her tears, Midoriya knows Ochako is hurting. Not only because she's been acting weird recently, but also because that even since the UA entrance exam, she has always prioritized others over herself. And as Deku says this with tears in his eyes, we see a montage of Uraraka doing just that throughout the entirety of this series. From the entrance exam to Black Whip, all the way up to the final war arc, we see her consistently putting others above herself. Midoriya then begins to approach Uraraka, who still has her arms defensively in front of her face, and as he does so, he says, "You're my hero, so I don't want to rely on your strength forever. Holding someone's hand can put your heart at ease. Did you know that?" Before reaching out and offering his hand to Ochako, gently lowering her arms. As Ochako holds onto Midoriya's hand and reveals her face, we see her eyes fill up with even more tears before she cries out, "Himiko died because of me. If I hadn't been stabbed." Her quirk allowed her to give blood to anyone. Couldn't she have been found sooner? If I'd known her when we were children, would things have been different? want. Ochako then places her head on Midoriya's shoulder as, in response to this, he explains how he's been thinking the exact same way about Tenko. And he goes on to say the consequences of this war will be far different compared to the previous. Even All For One himself warned Midoriya that this path they are on is a thorny one. Yet, despite all of this hardship and pain they're going through, he's still as sure as ever that if they keep reaching out, even when it's none of their business, one day we are not sure what he says because Class 2A burst onto the scene, including Aizawa, and rush over to comfort the two heroes. Froppy tackles Ochako to the ground with a loving hug as Bakugo asks Midoriya if he still has his embers after using One For All, which he explains that he does. The rest of the class then give out to Midoriya for not explaining to them how he's been working with embers since the end of the war, before the story cuts away to the class all enjoying themselves back at UA. As Midoriya narrates, One For All was completed through the heroism of many people. Now, if we could all create something together, cutting off to display happy moments such as Monoma gloating over a new statue made in his honor, as well as Eri singing a song with Jiro at Aoyama's farewell party. And with this little happy conclusion, the story cuts away once again. This time to a conversation between All Might and Hawks, where All Might tells Hawks that he wants to change the hero billboard chart, so that instead of just recognizing official heroes, it also recognizes anyone who performs an heroic act. All Might then goes on to explain that this will not only help it to escape its industrialized roots and recognize the efforts of all non-official heroes, especially those who fought in the war, but he also wants it so it can reflect to the masses how instead of there just being one great hero, there can be many. All Might then ends this proposal to Hawks, stating that it would also require a name change, particularly changing the word hero, which in Japanese is just a word spelled to sound like the English word hero, to the Japanese word AU, which actually means hero. It's gonna be fun to see how this one gets translated. Also, a little fun fact, if you reverse the symbols in AU, you get UA, the same name as the school. It's just hero backwards. But anyways, with this plot point, the story cuts away one last time this chapter, and all the way to the tortured man at the start, where we see him now looking tired, tense, and troubled, with a black liquid slowly beginning to expand outward from his hands as he begins to angrily question why is he the only one who has to suffer. A very familiar sentiment the young former king of villainy once had. Yet, in another twist of fate, and I mean a true twist this time, before the man can unleash his quirk in his anger, his hand is grabbed by none other than the woman who wouldn't help Tenko way back when. And as she looks at this boy before her and sees the pain he is suffering from, she not only thinks about how Midoriya has inspired her and everyone to look out for one another, but also about how she often loses sleep over not helping that small boy all those years ago. And so she reaches out to the boy saying, "It's fine now, because Grandma's here." The boy then freezes up, his quirk retracts, and his aggressive demeanor disappears as tears begin to fill his eyes before he accepts the elderly woman's embrace. A look into what could have been. And just slightly off in the distance, we see Midoriya and Uraraka both smiling together again, looking on at this act of kindness as we are left with the quote of Hawks' dream, a society where heroes have too much spare time. And that's it for chapter 429. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like. For more content like this, subscribe to the Lunchtime crew. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Remember, it's lunchtime.